Nuns Vanished. The shocking truth hidden in the convent. For 28 long silent years, the world spun on, oblivious, believing a fabricated narrative that cast a long, chilling shadow over our lives. They thought 5 sisters Grace, Martha, Eleanor, Joy, and Sarah had simply evaporated into the stormy September night of 1979. Some whispered we were dead, lost to the elements, swallowed by the wild, unforgiving Pennsylvania landscape. Others, perhaps with a touch more malice or a desire for scandalous tales, suggested we had renounced our sacred vows and absconded with men, abandoning our holy calling for earthly desires. But the truth, the raw, unvarnished truth, is a tapestry woven with threads of betrayal, terror, and an unthinkable abuse of power. A reality far more horrifying, more profoundly disturbing than anyone could ever have conceived. I am Grace. I am now 70 years old. My youthful face, etched with the wisdom and scars of 3 decades lived in clandestine anonymity. Today, for the first time since that desperate, rain-soaked night, I will unearth the real, unholy reason why 5 young women, bound by faith and sisterhood, were compelled to scale the cold, unforgiving walls of their convent in the dead of night, severing all ties to their former lives and disappearing as if they had never existed. This is not a simple narrative of faith wavering or spiritual doubt. It is an epic account of the purest evil, a malevolent force cloaked deceptively behind a holy cloth, of dark secrets meticulously concealed within supposedly sacred walls, and of 5 innocent women who were forced to sacrifice everything: their identities, their community, their very right to an open existence, to escape a living hell. If you are reading this from any corner of this vast world, I implore you, take a moment to leave a comment below and subscribe to this channel. There are truths, however unsettling, however capable of shaking the very foundations of your deepest beliefs, that must be brought into the light. There are stories, regardless of the searing pain they evoke, that demand to be told. This story, my friends, this deeply personal odyssey, will fundamentally alter the way you perceive faith, the insidious nature of power, and the immeasurable, often brutal price of truth. Prepare yourselves, for what I am about to unveil has been deliberately, cruelly buried for far too long. From my earliest recollections as a child, I possessed a quiet, introspective nature. I gravitated towards observation rather than participation, preferring to absorb the world around me with a discerning gaze. My mother, with her gentle wisdom, often remarked that I possessed a keen insight, an innate ability to perceive layers beneath the obvious, to glimpse beyond the superficial facade. Perhaps it was this very attribute, this quiet vigilance, that rendered me the soul's sentinel, the only watchful eye capable of noticing the insidious dark events silently unfolding within the seemingly idyllic confines of that heavenwood convent. I alone perceived the encroaching shadow, silently casting its pall behind the angelic smiles, the murmured daily prayers, and the routines of devotion. I entered the convent at the tender age of 16, not out of familial obligation or societal pressure, but of my own free will, propelled by a fervent, unshakable desire to serve God in both body and soul. In those initial blissful years, I found precisely the spiritual solace and purpose I had yearned for. The convent's meticulously structured routine enveloped me in a comforting embrace of security and predictability, imbuing every moment of the day with a profound sense of purpose, a tangible connection to something transcendent and divine. The other sisters, fellow travelers on this spiritual path, quickly transcended the role of colleagues. They became my chosen family, united by an unwavering shared faith. There were only 5 of us nuns inhabiting that modest convent, our small community guided by our revered Mother Superior, Mother Agnes. She was a woman of formidable presence, strict in her adherence to the rules, yet undeniably fair in her judgments and possessed of a truly generous heart. Havenwood was a quaint, tight-knit town, the kind of place where every face was familiar, every family history an open book. The convent perched majestically high on a verdant hill overlooking the community, played an undeniably vital and respected role in the daily lives of its inhabitants. It was within this seemingly idyllic, protected context that I first encountered Father Michael, a new parish priest who arrived when I was in my 5th year of religious life, a period usually marked by settled peace and profound spiritual growth. He was a tall, imposing man, his physical presence commanding attention. His voice, deep and resonant, boomed with undeniable authority from the altar, filling the chapel with its echoes. Initially, everyone, including some of us sisters, appeared to admire him, swayed by his charisma and eloquent sermons. However, it was not long before my quiet observation began to register unsettling subtleties. Discordant notes in the harmonious routine, prolonged unsettling glances. Questions posed during confession that blatantly overstepped the sacred bounds of what was necessary or appropriate. Touches on the shoulder that lingered a fraction of a second too long. Small, seemingly innocuous gestures that, when accumulated, began to reveal a deeply disturbing and predatory pattern. I soon realized, with a growing dread, that I was not the only one experiencing this profound discomfort. Sister Sarah, a delicate young woman of only 19, the youngest and most vulnerable among us, also began instinctively to avoid being alone with him. Her eyes frequently downcast, her demeanor increasingly withdrawn. The very atmosphere within our once joyful convent underwent a chilling metamorphosis. The pervasive joy and camaraderie gradually gave way to an oppressive, suffocating silence, heavy with unspoken secrets and deliberate omissions. Tragically, around that tumultuous period, Mother Agnes fell gravely ill, a victim of a severe bout of pneumonia that confined her to her bed, rendering her vulnerable and incapacitated for weeks. Without her formidable, protective presence, the convent became frighteningly exposed, a sanctuary suddenly stripped of its defenses. And it was precisely during this harrowing period that the insidious shadow I had been sensing, that subtle disquiet in my soul, transformed into something far more sinister, far more tangible, and undeniably terrifying. Father Michael, seizing the opportunity, began to visit the convent with alarming frequency, boldly utilizing his ecclesiastical authority to orchestrate situations that placed us in increasingly uncomfortable and compromising positions. I vividly recall the first instance I witnessed something truly serious, something that ripped through the veil of denial I might have clung to. I saw Sister Sarah trembling, trapped between a towering bookshelf and Father Michael in the hushed confines of the library. He was grasping her wrist with an unnerving, tight grip, while her face, usually so serene, was contorted with a palpable mixture of fear and profound shame. That night, sleep offered no respite. I lay awake, my mind a turbulent maelstrom of thousands of swirling, fragmented thoughts. Deep within my soul, an undeniable certainty solidified. Something profoundly, fundamentally wrong was unfolding. An abominable perversion that violated every single principle, every sacred tenet, that had originally compelled me to choose this life of devotion. Desperate for an ally, a voice of reason amidst the growing terror, I cautiously approached Sister Eleanor, our resident intellectual, known for her sharp mind. At first, her response was a wall of stunned silence, a reaction born of shock and the paralyzing fear that I understood all too intimately. For days, she appeared to be utterly paralyzed by the sheer horror of it all, unable to process the unthinkable. However, as the initial shock gradually receded, her keen, methodical mind, capacity for connecting disparate details, began to assert itself. The paralyzing silence gave way to quiet, pointed questions, incisive inquiries that started to piece together fragments of a puzzle I had missed. And it was she, not I, who finally shattered the oppressive stillness one evening by whispering the single, most critical word, the one word that offered a flicker of hope. The promise of salvation, proof. The subsequent discoveries I made, meticulously unearthed with Eleanor's guidance, shook me to the core of my being. generating not only profound horror, but also a searing indignation. The escalating situation was not an isolated incident, an unfortunate lapse in judgment. It was a systematic, calculated practice, coldly planned and executed with a chilling, remorseless cruelty. Confronted with this undeniable, monstrous reality, I understood with absolute clarity that it was imperative to act, to resist this encroaching darkness. True faith, I realized, does not passively submit to injustice. Genuine faith, a living, breathing conviction, compels you to confront evil, to rise against it, even when it cunningly presents itself under the guise of holiness, behind a mask of piety. However, in that moment of resolute decision, I could not have possibly imagined that this resolve would radically, irrevocably transform the entire trajectory of my existence, leading to a disappearance that would span 28 arduous years. I would be forcibly wrenched from everything familiar and dear to me, compelled to undergo an irreversible metamorphosis, forever shedding the skin of Sister Grace for a life in the shadows. The St. Mary of Peace Convent, before Father Michael's arrival, had been a picture of bucolic serenity. Its ancient gray stone walls, weathered by time and prayer, its narrow arched windows that framed glimpses of the peaceful world outside. A meticulously cared-for garden bursting with fragrant herbs and vibrant flowers, and a small, intimate chapel that acquired an even more profound, almost ethereal charm in the early morning hours when a gentle fog would descend, blanketing the quaint town and creating the illusion of being closer to heaven itself. Our daily routine was simple, methodical, and profoundly comforting in its predictability. We would awaken at 5 o'clock in the morning, gather to pray together in the dim, hallowed light of the chapel. And then each of us would dedicate ourselves to our individual responsibilities within the convent. My primary duty was the care of the vegetable garden, a task that brought me immense solace in addition to assisting in the bustling kitchen. The tactile contact with the damp, rich earth, the feel of the soil beneath my fingers, provided me with a profound sense of connection to the divine, a tangible touch of creation. Sister Martha, with her 65 years of experience and quiet wisdom, presided over the kitchen. Her loaves of bread were a true delight, legendary throughout Heavenwood, a crispy, golden crust yielding to an incredibly soft, fragrant crumb. Production intensified on Wednesdays and Saturdays, as these were the days we lovingly distributed the warm, fresh bread among the needy families of the community. She often imparted her simple philosophy: we feed the body to nourish the soul. Sister Eleanor was our intellectual, our quiet scholar. She dedicated countless hours, lost in thoughtful contemplation, poring over religious texts in the extensive convent library. She possessed an admirable, almost photographic memory, with an impressive ability to quote passages verbatim from the Holy Bible, often at precisely the right moment. She would always repeat, her voice soft but firm: knowledge is a form of prayer. Sister Joy, as her name suggested, radiated an almost infectious happiness. She was devoted to the children in the catechism classes, who absolutely adored her, drawn to her boundless energy and genuine warmth. Her favorite phrase, pronounced with a contagious, bubbling laugh, was, "A sad saint is a sorry saint." Sister Sarah, the youngest among us, was still a novice, having arrived only 6 months prior to these dark, transformative events. Shy and gentle, much like me in my youth, we had bonded effortlessly while working together in the garden, sharing a comforting, unspoken silence, a mutual understanding that transcended words. Mother Agnes remained our unwavering pillar, a firm and demanding figure, yes, but one whose discipline was always tempered by a generous, loving heart. Her maxim, oft repeated, guided our spiritual and communal life: discipline without love is tyranny, but love without discipline is indulgence. Our lives, collectively and individually, were wholly dedicated to service and prayer. Beyond our internal tasks, we extended our help tirelessly to the wider community. offering comfort, solace, and practical assistance wherever it was needed. The convent was not merely respected. It was revered and recognized throughout the region as a refuge of peace, kindness, and unwavering spiritual guidance. It was within this seemingly impenetrable atmosphere of simplicity, devotion, and community spirit that the insidious shadow began its slow, creeping infiltration. Our long-standing spiritual guide, Father Thomas, a kind, grandfatherly man who treated us with gentle respect, was abruptly transferred. We were saddened by the news of his departure, but understanding, we accepted the church's decree without question. Shortly after, Father Michael arrived. I vividly remember the very first day I saw him at the altar. His presence immediately dominated the sacred space, his powerful voice resonating through the ancient walls. Strong, clear, and undeniably authoritative. Something about him, an almost imperceptible undercurrent, caused me an inexplicable discomfort, a subtle unease that I couldn't articulate. Yet, the other sisters, less attuned to the subtle shifts, seemed positively impressed, charmed by his commanding presence. On his inaugural visit to the convent, he brought gifts, a seemingly innocuous gesture that masked a deeper, more manipulative intent. A weighty theological book for Sister Eleanor, a small, intricate statue for the chapel, and packets of unusual exotic seeds for our garden. During his first confessions, his questions subtly deviated from the usual spiritual inquiries, becoming progressively more invasive, more personal. He displayed an unsettling interest in the details of my life before the convent, probing into my past and, disturbingly, questioning my impure thoughts with a persistent, almost prurient curiosity. His visits became increasingly frequent, always accompanied by some ostensibly innocent excuse. He needed to consult a rare book in the library, had specific questions about medicinal herbs in the garden, or simply wanted to check in to see if we needed anything. Every time he crossed the convent threshold, a somber, unsettling atmosphere seemed to accompany him, a tangible chill in the air. I began to observe distinct patterns in his behavior, particularly the way he subtly maneuvered to create moments of privacy with the younger sisters. The unsettling intensity of his gaze when he thought no one was watching, and the insidious way he employed his physical touch. His touches were always ostensibly casual, a guiding hand on the elbow, a comforting pat on the shoulder, yet they were unmistakably calculated, lingering longer than acceptable, always carrying an unspoken, uncomfortable weight. One day, Sister Sarah, her hands visibly trembling, dropped a gardening tool on the ground just as his resonant voice called out her name from nearby. Her hands shook so violently that I had to physically help her retrieve it. "What did he do to you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, a knot forming in my stomach. Her only response was to burst into quiet, desperate sobs, murmuring between gasps that he had threatened her, claiming with chilling conviction that no one, absolutely no one, would ever believe her word against his. My heart pounded with a nascent fear and a growing, desperate anger. I tried to speak to Mother Agnes to convey my profound unease, but she was outraged by my insinuations, her faith in a man of God unshakable. She sternly instructed me to go and pray to ask for forgiveness for my impure thoughts towards a priest, a representative of the sacred. The situation, unaddressed and unchecked, worsened dramatically. Father Michael began to act with increasing audacity, as if absolutely confident he would never be reported, that his actions were beyond reproach. I became a helpless, tormented witness to the profound suffering etched on my sisters' faces, especially Sarah's, who seemed to be wasting away, her spirit dimming with each passing day. The crisis reached its critical zenith when Mother Agnes fell gravely ill. The priest, with a facade of concern, announced that he would now come daily to watch over our spiritual well-being. It was then that his mask of sanctity, that thin veneer of holiness, fell away completely, revealing the monster beneath. One night I stumbled upon Sarah, huddled desperately in the hallway, her habit disheveled, a reddish, angry mark blooming on her cheek. "No one will believe me," she murmured repeatedly, her voice laced with despair. Adding, from the moment I stepped through the ancient wooden doors of St. Mary of Peace, at only 16 years old, my heart swelled with a singular, profound purpose. You see, I had always been a quiet girl, more inclined to watch than to speak, often seeing things others missed. My mother, bless her soul, often said I had an unusual depth, an ability to peer beyond surface appearances. Perhaps that was why, even then, I sensed a subtle ripple in the air, an almost imperceptible tremor beneath the tranquil surface of our beloved heavenwood. I sought God with every fiber of my being, drawn by a fervent desire to dedicate my life, my body, and my soul to His service. And for those first few years, I found precisely what my spirit craved. Imagine a life of perfect order, a rhythm of prayer and service that enveloped you in a comforting embrace. That was our convent. The routine was a balm, each moment imbued with meaning, a direct conduit to the transcendent. We woke with the dawn, the chapel bathed in a soft, ethereal light, the scent of old stone and beeswax filling the air. Our collective prayers, a soft murmur of devotion, wove themselves into the very fabric of the morning. Afterwards, each of us would embrace our duties with a quiet joy. I remember the meticulously cared-for garden, its gray stone walls framing a vibrant tapestry of life. My hands, though young, learned the comforting intimacy of damp earth, tending to the vegetables that would nourish our bodies and, through our charitable work, the bodies of the needy families in Heavenwood. There was a deep spiritual connection in feeling the soil, watching life burst forth from the ground. Sister Martha, with her 65 years of gentle wisdom, reigned supreme in the kitchen. Her bread, the miracle of crispy crust and impossibly soft crumb. It was a delight. Wednesdays and Saturdays, the air would hum with increased activity as we prepared loaves for distribution. Martha always repeating her sweet mantra. We feed the body to nourish the soul. Sister Eleanor was our brilliant light, our intellectual powerhouse. She devoured religious texts in the library, her mind a vast repository of biblical passages quoted with impressive precision. Knowledge is a form of prayer, she would declare, her eyes shining with earnest conviction. Then there was Sister Joy, a name that perfectly captured her essence. She practically radiated happiness, an infectious warmth that enchanted the children in her catechism classes. Her favorite saying, delivered with a contagious giggle, was, "A sad saint is a sorry saint." And finally, Sister Sarah, the youngest, a novice of only 19. Barely 6 months into her religious journey, when the shadows began to lengthen. She was shy, much like me, and we often found solace in each other's quiet company while working side by side in the garden, sharing a comforting silence that spoke volumes. Our Mother Superior, Mother Agnes, was the unwavering pillar of our small community. Strict? Yes, but undeniably fair. Her generous heart beat beneath a demanding exterior. Her maxim, etched in my memory, was, "Discipline without love is tyranny, but love without discipline is indulgence." We were a family, truly bound by shared faith and a commitment to service, extending our help to the wider Heavenwood community. Our convent, perched majestically on a hill, was a recognized beacon of peace and kindness in a town where everyone knew everyone else. It was into this serene, almost bucolic world that the shadow began to creep. You see, for many years, our spiritual guide had been Father Thomas, a man whose kindness was so profound he was almost like a grandfather to us. We mourned his transfer, though we understood it was part of the church's way. But his departure left a void, a vulnerability we couldn't yet comprehend. Then Father Michael arrived. I remember it with a chilling clarity that still haunts my waking hours. The first day I saw him at the altar, his presence seemed to dominate the space, an almost physical weight in the hallowed air. His voice, strong and clear, resonated through the ancient walls, carrying an undeniable authority, while the other sisters seemed positively impressed, almost mesmerized by his commanding demeanor. An inexplicable discomfort settled deep within my own spirit. It was a subtle discord, a faint dissonant note in the convent's harmonious melody. On his first visit to our sanctuary, he came bearing gifts: a leather-bound book for Sister Eleanor, a small, intricate statue for our chapel, a packet of unusual seeds for our garden. These were gestures designed to charm, to establish an early veneer of benevolence. But soon, the veneer began to crack. During my first confession with him, his questions, instead of offering spiritual guidance, veered unsettlingly from the usual path. They became probing, invasive, showing an unnerving interest in the details of my life before the convent. Even questioning what he termed my impure thoughts, a cold knot formed in my stomach. This was not the gentle guiding hand of a spiritual leader. His visits escalated, becoming increasingly frequent, always cloaked in some plausible excuse. He needed to consult a rare book in our library, or he had questions about the medicinal herbs we cultivated in the garden, or he simply wanted to check if we needed anything. But with each visit, a somber, almost oppressive atmosphere accompanied him, like a shroud descending upon our once joyous home. I, the quiet observer, began to discern a disturbing pattern in his behavior. I noticed the way his gaze lingered on the younger sisters, particularly Sarah and Joy. The intensity in his eyes was not one of pastoral concern, but something far more predatory. And his touches seemingly casual, a hand on a shoulder, a brush of fingers as he passed. They weren't accidental. They lingered, imbued with an unspoken, unwelcome familiarity. One day, the facade shattered completely. Sister Sarah, usually so composed, dropped a gardening tool with a clatter as Father Michael's voice echoed nearby. Her hands were trembling so violently I had to steady them. "What did he do to you?" I whispered, my own voice tight with burgeoning fear and anger. Her only response was a silent, desperate cascade of tears, a raw, unbearable agony that tore at my heart. She choked out fragmented words, murmuring that he had threatened her, claiming no one would ever believe a simple, insignificant nun over a man of God. My blood ran cold. The shadow I had felt, the discomfort I had tried to rationalize, now solidified into something profoundly evil. Desperate, I tried to confide in Mother Agnes. I sought her out, my voice trembling as I attempted to convey the insidious nature of Father Michael's actions. But her reaction was a wall of outrage, a righteous indignation directed not at him, but at me. She dismissed my insinuations as unthinkable, an affront to a man of the cloth, and sternly instructed me to go pray, to ask for forgiveness for my own impure thoughts toward a priest. My heart sank. The protective shield of our Mother Superior, the one person who should have listened, had become an unwitting accomplice to the darkness. The situation spiraled. Without Mother Agnes's protective presence, his actions grew bolder, as if he knew he was untouchable beyond reproach. He moved with an almost chilling certainty that no one would dare report him, or worse, that no one would believe any accusation leveled against him. I became a helpless witness to the suffering etched on my sisters' faces, especially Sarah's. Each passing day saw her wasting away, her gentle spirit dimming under the weight of an unspoken horror. The convent, which had once been our sanctuary, our haven of peace, slowly, insidiously transformed into a place of suffocating oppression, laden with unspoken secrets and omissions. The joyful laughter that once echoed in the corridors was replaced by an agonizing, pervasive silence. It was a silence born of fear, a silence that bred despair. And it was precisely during this period when Mother Agnes lay gravely ill, confined to her bed by a severe pneumonia, that the shadow I had sensed from the beginning mutated into something truly sinister and terrifying. Father Michael began to visit the convent almost daily, not as a comforter, but as a tormentor, using his clerical authority to force us into increasingly uncomfortable and vulnerable situations. I can recall with a vividness that sends shivers down my spine even now. The first time I witnessed something undeniably serious, something that tore away any remaining shred of doubt. It was in the hushed quiet of the library. I saw Sister Sarah trapped between a towering bookshelf and Father Michael. His hand gripped her wrist with a sickening tightness. Her face a mask of terror and shame, her young eyes wide with a silent scream. That night, sleep abandoned me. 1,000 thoughts, dark and terrifying, swirled in my mind. Deep down, I knew something profoundly, irreversibly wrong was happening. Something that desecrated every single principle that had compelled me to embrace this holy life. I tried, desperately, to find an ally. I turned to Sister Eleanor, hoping her keen intellect and strong spirit would offer some guidance. At first, her response was a horrified silence, a wall of shock and fear that I understood all too well. For days, she seemed paralyzed, overwhelmed by the sheer horror of what I had confessed. The weight of it, the unimaginable betrayal, seemed to crush her. But as the initial shock began to recede, her sharp, methodical mind, her capacity for critical thought began to reassert itself. The silence gave way not to immediate accusation, but to quiet, pointed questions, incisive inquiries that cut through the fog of emotion. She started connecting disparate details that I, in my emotional distress, had overlooked. And it was she, not I, who finally shattered the oppressive stillness one evening. Her voice barely a whisper, uttering the single, potent word that would eventually offer us a flicker of hope. Proof. Her demand for proof ignited a new resolve within me. The subsequent discoveries shook me to my core, generating not just horror, but a burning, righteous indignation. This was not an isolated incident, not a momentary lapse of judgment. This was a systematic practice, coldly planned, executed with an almost unimaginable cruelty. It was a calculated abuse of power, a grotesque perversion of faith. Faced with this undeniable truth, I understood with absolute clarity that we had to act. True faith, I realized, does not submit to injustice. Genuine faith compels you to confront evil. Even when that evil hides behind the most sacred of masks, even when it cloaks itself in holy cloth. I, the quiet observer, the reserved Sister Grace, understood in that moment that I would have to take the initiative. My role had shifted from simply noticing the shadow to actively seeking to dispel it. The walls of our sanctuary, once a symbol of protection, now felt like a prison trapping us with our tormentor. The man who was meant to be our spiritual guide had revealed himself to be a wolf in sheep's clothing, devouring the very flock he swore to protect. It was imperative, a moral imperative, to do something. Do you know that kind of fear? The kind that paralyzes your very soul. That makes your heart beat so ferociously you feel it might shatter your ribs. I lived with that fear constantly, in that convent. After Mother Agnes's illness, Father Michael proved himself to be extraordinarily cunning, a master manipulator. In front of others, he was impeccably proper, his behavior beyond reproach, a portrait of saintly piety. But the moment he managed to isolate one of us, his inner demon manifested, chilling and grotesque. I began to realize he deliberately orchestrated these situations, sending separate, seemingly innocuous messages to each sister. Sister Sarah, I need to discuss an important matter with you in the sacristy. Sister Grace, come to the library after prayers. Poor Sarah. So very young, having only recently taken her final vows, was the one who suffered most acutely. She was too shy, too gentle, too overwhelmed to defend herself against such a powerful figure. I witnessed on several agonizing occasions how he would press her against a wall, how he would speak too close to her face, his breath a noxious cloud, how his hands would accidentally brush against parts of her body no man should ever touch. One night, I found Sarah huddled in the pantry, trembling uncontrollably, desperately adjusting her habit. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "He says he's my spiritual guide," she choked out, her eyes wide with a terror that ripped through me. "He says I must obey him. He says if I tell anyone, I will go to hell." My blood boiled. For the first time in my life, I felt the searing heat of true hatred. I pulled Sarah into my arms, hugging her tightly, promising to protect her. But the question clawed at my mind. How? Who would believe the word of two obscure nuns against a respected, celebrated priest? I confronted Eleanor again. "We have to do something," I insisted, my voice urgent. Eleanor sighed, her shoulders slumping with a weariness that belied her years. "What do you suggest, Grace?" she asked, her voice laced with bitter resignation. "No one will believe us. A priest's word is worth more than ours in this place." "But what about Mother Agnes?" I pressed, clinging to a desperate hope. "She has to know." Eleanor shook her head, a mournful gesture. "The mother is gravely ill, Grace, and even if we had the chance, she would side with the priest against the church. Against us. That's the way it is." The situation deteriorated further, spiraling into a deeper hell when Sister Joy, our radiant Sister Joy, became a target of his attacks. Before always so cheerful, so full of life, she began to withdraw, her infectious laughter replaced by a suffocating silence. Her appetite vanished, and her eyes, once sparkling with devotion, were now perpetually red and swollen from silent crying. One afternoon, she finally broke down in my arms, a torrent of sobs racking her slender frame. She recounted how Father Michael had summoned her for special spiritual guidance, and then, under the guise of confession, began to interrogate her about her chastity in a way that left her horrified and deeply violated. The moment I tried to leave, she recounted, her voice still thick with terror. "He grabbed my arm with such force that he left a bruise. Something inside me snapped, seeing Joy. Once so robust in her, the word echoed endlessly in my mind. Escape, day and night. It was a constant drumbeat, a desperate rhythm of survival. I, Sister Grace, the silent observer, had never imagined that one day I would be planning an escape from a convent. The very place I had chosen as my sanctuary, my home, my life. Yet there we were, 5 frightened nuns, huddled in the chill of the cellar, surrounded by dusty crates of potatoes and rows of canned goods, our whispers barely audible above the gnawing fear. Sister Eleanor, always the pragmatist, was the first to voice her apprehension. "If we run, we'll look guilty," she reasoned, her voice tight with anxiety. "They'll say we have something to hide, and we do," Joy retorted, her usual radiance replaced by a bitter edge. Her eyes, usually sparkling with life, were now shadowed with a deep, consuming pain. "We have to hide our shame, our humiliation. The fact that the church has abandoned us, that it has chosen to protect a monster over its own innocent daughters." Her words hung heavy in the air. Stark, undeniable truth. Sister Sarah, young and fragile, simply sobbed quietly, hugging her knees, her body a small, trembling testament to the terror that had become our daily bread. Sister Martha, our eldest, remained silent for what felt like an eternity, her aged face a mask of profound thought. Then her voice, though soft, resonated with an unyielding resolve that silenced our doubts. 60 years, she began, each word a slow, deliberate pronouncement. "For 60 years, I have served God within these walls. I thought I would find peace in death here, that this consecrated ground would be my final resting place. However, now I realize that sometimes God demands sacrifices we do not understand. If it is necessary to leave this place to protect my sisters, to save these young women from a fate worse than death, then His will be done." Her words, spoken with such conviction, solidified our fragmented resolve. We would flee together, as a united front against the darkness that sought to consume us. But how? How could 5 women with no financial resources, no contacts outside the convent's secluded walls, and no tangible direction possibly accomplish such a monumental feat? The convent wall was a formidable barrier, built of ancient gray stone, its summit adorned with jagged shards of glass, a brutal deterrent against anyone who dared to leave or enter unbidden. The main gate, a heavy wrought iron structure, was loud and cumbersome, designed to announce every visitor. Even if we somehow managed to traverse these physical obstacles, where would we go? We needed outside help, someone we could implicitly trust, someone who could guide us through the perilous journey into an unknown world. I prayed as I had never prayed before, not reciting the memorized verses and structured litanies of our daily routine, but pouring out the raw, deepest feelings of my soul. a desperate plea for divine intervention. Lord, I implored, my voice a barely audible whisper in the darkness of the cellar. If we are truly doing your will, send us a sign, a clear indication that we are not abandoning our faith, but pursuing it in its purest form, justice. And he sent it, in the most unexpected, most humble way imaginable. Mr. Miller, the quiet, unassuming supplier who delivered fresh vegetables to the convent twice a week. A simple man, his hands calloused from years of working the land, his words few, his presence almost invisible. He lived alone on a small farm on the outskirts of Havenwood, a solitary figure we rarely thought about beyond his deliveries. That day, as I helped him unload crates of newly harvested squash and plump tomatoes, he looked at me differently. His gaze, usually averted, lingered, carrying a weight I hadn't seen before. "You don't look well, Sister Grace," he commented in a low, gruff voice, barely above a murmur. I was startled. Mr. Miller rarely said anything more than what was strictly necessary for the transaction. His observation, so direct, caught me off guard. "I'm fine," I replied, forcing a smile that felt brittle and fake. "Just a little tired." My heart was pounding, a wild bird trapped in my chest. Had he noticed something? Was this a trap? He continued to watch me, his weathered eyes holding an inexplicable depth. "Forgive my prying, sister, but my late wife used to say I had a gift for sensing when people are troubled. A knack for seeing beyond the surface." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the other sisters who were also helping with the unloading, then returned to me, holding my gaze intently. "If you or the other sisters need help for an eye reason, you can count on me." My heart, already racing, now hammered against my ribs with an almost violent intensity. Was this it? Was this the sign I had been praying for? The unexpected hand reaching out from the darkness? Or was it a dangerous, elaborate trap set by Father Michael, a test of our resolve? Caution warred with a desperate, overwhelming hope. "What makes you think we need help, Mr. Miller?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, imbued with a careful, calculated neutrality. He sighed, a sound heavy with unspoken grief. "My eldest daughter joined a convent up north," he revealed, his voice dropping even lower, almost lost in the rustling of the leaves. She also had problems with a priest, his eyes usually placid, darkened, reflecting a pain that mirrored our own. By the time she was finally able to tell me what had happened, it was too late. She never recovered, sister. Never found peace. An immediate, profound connection bloomed between us in that shared moment of sorrow. This man, this silent, unassuming farmer, carried his own deeply personal pain. A pain that granted him an understanding beyond words. He saw us, truly saw us, not as infallible nuns, but as vulnerable women in distress. "You're right," I confessed, the forced smile vanishing, replaced by a raw, unvarnished truth. "We need help. A lot of help." In the days that followed, Mr. Miller became our covert ally, our lifeline to a world we had long since forsaken. We exchanged information with meticulous discretion, our communications hidden among the fresh vegetables he delivered. Notes carefully folded and tucked into hollowed-out gourds or beneath bundles of carrots became our secret language. In one of his notes, handwritten with surprising detail, he informed me of a specific section of the rear convent wall, where the ancient stones were crumbling, weakened by time and neglect. A massive oak tree, centuries old, grew close by, its thick, gnarled branches extending like welcoming arms over the very top. "No glass there," he wrote, the words underscored for emphasis. "The branches will give you cover and something to hold on to. I will leave an old rope ladder hidden in the bushes nearby. It's your only viable path." It was indeed. A glimmer of a plan, concrete and terrifying, began to take shape in our desperate minds. Mr. Miller, with a generosity that humbled us, revealed he had a cousin in the remote, mist-shrouded mountains of North Carolina. A quiet, isolated man who owned a small, unassuming inn. The cousin, after hearing a carefully vague version of our plight, agreed to take us in temporarily, offering a safe haven far from Havenwood, Mr. Miller, astonishingly. offered to use his life savings to finance our perilous journey and provide for our initial period of adjustment. "I can't stand by and watch you go through what happened to my Rosie," he declared. His eyes swimming with unshed tears, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't let it happen again." His selfless act solidified our resolve, deepening our trust and filling us with a profound, almost sacred sense of gratitude. The plan itself was simple, though fraught with unimaginable risks. We would escape on a night of torrential rain, hoping the storm would mask our movements, our sounds, our very presence. Mr. Miller would wait for us with his old pickup truck in a secluded spot on a little-used dirt road, far enough from the convent to avoid immediate detection, yet close enough for a swift getaway. We would have to climb that crumbling section of the rear wall, where the ancient oak tree offered its natural leafy canopy as a shield. However, before anything else, it was absolutely essential to gather a few precious, vital items. Eleanor, ever the resourceful one, managed to retrieve our birth certificates and various other identification documents from the convent archives, a task she accomplished with a calm, almost unnerving stealth that surprised us all. Joy, practical and quick-witted, somehow managed to gather a small, clandestine collection of essential medications, pain relievers, and bandages anticipating potential injuries. Sarah and I, with heavy hearts, took on the task of gathering civilian clothes, acutely aware that our religious habits, the very symbol of our identity, would be instantly recognizable. A beacon for anyone searching, Mr. Miller, through a discreet network of neighbors, procured a small assortment of plain, unassuming clothing, simple dresses and sturdy shoes for each of us. The hardest part, the most emotionally wrenching, was deciding what to leave behind. The small, worn rosary my mother had given me as a child, Eleanor's beloved leather-bound prayer book, Joy's tiny porcelain statue of Our Lady, Martha's treasured family photo album, each item a tangible link to our past, to our very souls. But we had to travel with the bare minimum, as Eleanor sternly reminded us, her voice brooking no argument. "Only what is strictly necessary for survival, sisters. Nothing more." As the appointed day loomed, suffocating blanket of fear settled over us, growing thicker and heavier with each passing hour. What if we were discovered? The question, though unspoken, hung palpably in the air, a silent torment. What if Father Michael found out before we even left? What then? "We can still back out," I suggested one night, my own courage wavering under the immense pressure. "I can go alone to Montana as the bishop ordered. At least that would be a safe place, a known fate." "Don't even think about it." Joy interrupted me, her voice sharp with an uncharacteristic fierceness, her eyes blazing with a defiant fire. "If one goes, we all go. We are a family, Grace. We stay together, no matter what." Her words were a powerful affirmation cementing our collective resolve. That very same night, just as the last sliver of moonlight vanished behind a rapidly gathering shroud of clouds, we heard a soft scraping noise coming from the cellar stairs. Someone was descending. We froze, our hearts hammering in unison, convinced we had been discovered. Our plan was ruined. Our carefully constructed world of whispered hopes and desperate dreams was about to shatter. But it wasn't Father Michael. It was Sister Helen, an older nun, frail and stooped, who had always seemed to blindly support Father Michael, her piety seemingly unshakable. Her presence filled us with dread, a fresh wave of despair washing over us. "I know what you're planning," she said bluntly, her voice surprisingly firm, cutting through the thick silence like a knife. My heart pounded a frantic drum against my ribs. We were lost, utterly, irrevocably lost. To our astonishment, however, Helen reached into the deep pocket of her worn habit and pulled out a small, surprisingly heavy leather pouch. She emptied its contents onto the rough wooden table, a small pile of crumpled bills and a handful of tarnished coins. "Take it," she urged, pushing the money towards us with a trembling hand. "It's all I've saved over the years from doing sewing jobs for the townspeople. Let it help you get started. To find your feet in that world outside." I was momentarily speechless. my gaze alternating between the unexpected bounty and her tear-filled eyes. "But why?" I managed to ask the question, a confused whisper. A deep sigh escaped her, heavy with a lifetime of regret. "I always pretended to believe him because I was afraid," she confessed. Her voice barely audible, filled with a raw, heartbreaking honesty. "Because I'm too old to start over. Because I'm a coward." Her gaze swept over our younger faces, then settled on mine. "But you are not. You are young. You are brave. You deserve a chance to escape this hell, to live a life free from his shadow." In that instant, a profound realization washed over me. We were not the only victims. Perhaps there had been others before us, silent sufferers, trapped by fear and circumstance. Just like Sister Helen, I reached out and hugged her, holding her frail body close, tears streaming down my face. "Come with us, Sister Helen," I pleaded, desperate for her to join us, to escape her own prison of fear. "It's not too late. You can come with us." She gently pulled away, wiping her tears with the back of her hand, a sad, knowing smile gracing her lips. "For me, it is too late," she murmured, her voice laced with an unshakable melancholy. "But I will pray for you. Every single day. I will pray that you find the peace I never could." Her words were a blessing and a burden. A poignant reminder of the lives that remained, trapped behind those hallowed yet tainted walls. The night before the escape, sleep was an impossibility. My mind raced, a tumultuous torrent of thoughts and emotions. I reflected on my family, the distant memories of their faces fading with each passing year. I thought of my vocation, the innocent, fervent desire that had led me to the convent at 16. And I thought of God. Were we truly making the right decision? Were we abandoning him by abandoning his house? "If we are doing your will, Lord," I pleaded in the darkness, my prayer a silent, desperate cry from the depths of my soul. "Please protect us, guide us, forgive us." The next morning, amidst the usual delivery, Mr. Miller left a small, folded note hidden among the freshly picked lettuces. It was terse, yet carried the weight of our fate. Tonight, it read, his looping script surprisingly steady. "At midnight, it will rain." The rest of the day passed in a surreal blur. A whirlwind of suppressed nervousness, each minute stretching into an eternity. We performed our daily tasks as usual, meticulously, trying with every ounce of our being not to arouse suspicion, to betray no hint of this seismic shift about to engulf our lives. At midnight, when the ancient convent bell tolled 12 times, its deep, resonant chimes echoing above the steadily increasing sound of the rain, we took off our habits. We carefully folded them, each gesture a silent, ritualistic farewell, and placed them reverently in the cellar, a symbolic shedding of our old identities. I looked at my sisters, almost unrecognizable in their plain borrowed clothes. Their faces pale, but we found sanctuary, for a time, at Sam's Inn. It was a haven, quiet and secluded, tucked away in the North Carolina mountains, a perfect refuge for those who wished to remain unseen. Mary, Sam's wife, a woman of few words but profound empathy, treated us with an unspoken respect that transcended our shared silences. She never pried, never asked for the details of our harrowing flight. Yet one afternoon, as I stood beside her pinning freshly laundered sheets to the line, she gently took my hand. "I know you're running from something grave," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I don't need to know what it is. I only want you to understand that here in this home, you are safe." Her words, so simple, yet so deeply understanding, brought a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion. Tears welled in my eyes. It was as if, for the first time since that terrifying night, someone had truly seen our suffering without requiring a single explanation. Her acceptance was a balm to our bruised souls. Yet, even in that precious sanctuary, a gnawing reality persisted. We couldn't remain indefinitely. The inn, though welcoming, was modest, and our collective conscience wouldn't allow us to indefinitely live off the boundless generosity of others. Moreover, the world outside had begun to whisper about our disappearance. Our story, though not splashed across the front pages of national dailies, had found its way into local Pennsylvania newspapers and regional radio broadcasts. Nuns missing in Havenwood, suspected kidnapping. One headline screamed. A chilling fabrication that painted us as helpless victims. Another, more insidious, declared. Parish priest of Havenwood reveals fugitive nuns had inappropriate behavior. My heart sank with each word I secretly devoured. Father Michael, the wolf in sheep's clothing, was busy weaving a narrative of his own, one that slandered us, portraying us as rebellious, emotionally unstable, and utterly unworthy of our sacred vows. In one of these cruel dispatches, we learned the devastating news. Mother Agnes had passed away. Not from the pneumonia she was bravely battling, but from a heart attack. Her fragile heart giving out upon learning of our escape. A crushing weight of guilt settled upon us, heavy and suffocating. We knew in the deepest recesses of our hearts that the true culprit was the man who had forced us to flee. But the world, the church, and perhaps even God might see it differently. We can't go back, Eleanor declared, her voice hollow, devoid of its usual intellectual certainty. Now they'll say we killed Mother Agnes with our sinful behavior, with Sam and Mary's unwavering assistance. New documents mysteriously materialized. We were advised not to ask how, told that there were truths best left undiscovered. Just like that, our former selves evaporated. No longer were we sisters Grace, Eleanor, Joy, Sarah, and Martha. We were Linda, Catherine, Rose, Emily, and Malia, seemingly ordinary family, bound by a fabricated history of loss and starting anew after a devastating flood. Sam, ever resourceful, found us a connection in Cleveland, Ohio, a small garment factory in need of diligent workers. The labor was simple, mostly sewing uniforms, but the pay was steady enough to sustain us. Crucially, the factory owner, a kind man, asked no probing questions. So, after 3 months of uneasy peace at the inn, we journeyed to Cleveland, a vast anonymous city where we hoped to disappear amidst the surging crowds. We rented a modest house in a secluded neighborhood, our sole desire, discretion, and complete anonymity. Adapting to this new, secular world was a colossal undertaking. None of us were conversant with the everyday customs of modern life. Imagine, for a moment, you are suddenly thrust into a world where every simple task becomes an insurmountable challenge. Using a public payphone, navigating the bewildering maze of public transportation, or even the sheer overwhelming experience of shopping in a supermarket, these were complex alien rituals. I distinctly remember the overwhelming panic that gripped me the first time we attempted to open a checking account at a bank. The sheer tension of it all was so profound, so suffocating, that I nearly collapsed in the waiting line. Eleanor, our steadfast intellectual, possessed a singular courage that allowed her to confront the unknown head-on. Joy, with her innate sunny disposition, displayed a surprising aptitude for adaptation. Sarah, despite her tender years, absorbed new information with remarkable speed. Martha, our eldest, valiantly strove to overcome the physical limitations imposed by her age. Her determination and inspiration to us all. The factory work, though physically demanding and often exhausting, offered a strange, unexpected comfort. The rhythmic, repetitive motions of the sewing machines possessed a calming, almost meditative effect on our minds. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, we experienced the profound satisfaction of actively contributing to our own survival, earning our keep and forging a new path. Slowly, painstakingly, we established a new rhythm, a new semblance of routine. While we had by necessity distanced ourselves physically from the institutional church, our individual faith remained an unshakable anchor. Every night we would gather, not for formal memorized prayers, but for intimate, heartfelt conversations with God, our rawest emotions laid bare. As the days bled into weeks and weeks into months, the years began to accumulate. Cleveland gradually transformed from a daunting metropolis into a familiar, even welcoming home. The factory prospered, and with its success, our wages increased, allowing us to move to a larger, more comfortable house. We even cultivated a few friendships, always maintaining a certain guarded reserve, meticulously omitting the crucial, terrifying chapters of our past. Mr. Prominus, the factory owner, a discerning man, recognized Eleanor's exceptional talent and promoted her to production supervisor after 3 years. This increase in salary was a welcome blessing, especially as Martha, our beloved Aunt Millie, began to show increasing signs of physical fragility. It was around 1983 when we endured our first irreparable loss. Sister Martha, our Aunt Millie, suffered a debilitating stroke while preparing a meal in the kitchen. By the time we discovered her, it was tragically too late. Her funeral, a hushed affair attended only by the 4 of us and a handful of factory acquaintances, remains one of the most agonizing experiences of my life. We couldn't honor her as Sister Martha, couldn't bury her with the religious solemnity she deserved. We were forced to lay her to rest under the name Amelia Peterson, an ordinary old woman, her true identity forever hidden beneath the earth. After Martha's passing, a new decision weighed upon us to move again. Mr. Russo, Mr. Prominus's business partner, was opening a new branch of the factory in Charlotte, North Carolina, and offered Eleanor the coveted manager position. We accepted without hesitation. Charlotte, a sprawling, bustling metropolis, promised an even greater anonymity, an easier place to simply get lost in the human current. However, it also meant we would be more exposed to news, to the possibility, however remote, of recognition. Our lives continued in this quiet, clandestine fashion for nearly a decade. I began to entertain a fragile hope that perhaps, at long last, we had found a measure of peace. That illusion shattered in 1994 when I stumbled upon a photograph of Father Michael in a local newspaper. Havenwood priest celebrates 30 years of service to the community. The headline proclaimed in triumphant, bold letters. There he was, a little older, a few more lines etched around his eyes. But with the same self-satisfied, hypocritical smile I remembered with such chilling clarity. The accompanying article lauded him as a revered pillar of the community, extolling his tireless dedication and spiritual leadership. I raced to the nearest bathroom, my stomach churning with visceral disgust, and promptly vomited. Not only had he escaped any consequence for his monstrous actions, but he had thrived, been acclaimed, and showered with honors, while we, his victims, languished in hiding, perpetually haunted by the specter of fear. The sheer injustice of it was a bitter, indigestible pill. This horrifying discovery profoundly shook us to our core. For the first time, a profound, unsettling question began to echo within our carefully constructed silence. Had we made the right decision by fleeing? Had our silence, our forced anonymity, not simply allowed him to continue his depravities, to abuse other unsuspecting women? From that moment forward, Eleanor, our rock, our intellectual compass, became noticeably more withdrawn, more taciturn. When I pressed her, asking what tormented her, she would only reply, "I'm thinking about the future." "Grace, what will become of us when we're too old to work, too frail to hide?" In 1997, Eleanor fell ill. At first, we dismissed it as a simple cold, a fleeting indisposition. But her health deteriorated with alarming speed. The doctor diagnosed her with pneumonia, and she was hospitalized. In her 3rd week in the sterile, unforgiving hospital room, Eleanor revealed the devastating truth. "It's not just pneumonia, Grace," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's advanced stage cancer." The news ripped through me like a cruel blade. Eleanor, our unwavering strength, our intellectual beacon, our pragmatic leader, was fading. On her deathbed, her grip surprisingly strong despite her rapidly ebbing vitality, she clutched my hand. "Grace, you must promise me something," she pleaded, her eyes burning with an intense final urgency. "Promise me that one day the truth about what happened in Havenwood will finally emerge. We cannot allow that monster to continue living as if he were a saint." A shadow of doubt, however, flickered in her gaze. Who would believe us now, after so much time, after so many years of silence? With a weak, almost imperceptible sigh, she murmured, "It's not time yet." "But someday, Grace. Someday, when it's safe. Promise me." Eleanor, our Catherine, passed away 2 weeks later. She was interred in a small, unassuming cemetery on the outskirts of Charlotte. A modest and discreet funeral that offered none of the honors she truly deserved. The loss of our leader, our strategist, was a devastating blow, a void that no one else could fill. The years that followed Eleanor's passing blurred into a melancholic haze of adaptation and gradual rebuilding. Sarah, our Emily, found a measure of happiness. Marrying her boyfriend from the factory and settling into her own house nearby, though still close enough for regular visits. Joy and I continued to share a home, two single sisters devoted to our work, occasionally seeking solace in the quiet solitude of churches in distant cities, yearning for a familiar peace that always seemed just out of reach. On one of these contemplative trips, Joy confessed, her voice thick with unaddressed pain, "Sometimes I wonder if God has truly forgiven us for breaking our sacred vows. Do you truly believe we need forgiveness for fleeing an abuser?" I challenged, my voice sharper than I intended. "Not for that," Joy clarified, her gaze distant, "but for abandoning our true vocation, for never trying to find another convent, far, far away from that monster, for just giving up." I realized then that Joy, despite everything, still yearned for the rigorous structure, the profound purpose of religious life. Her heart ached for it, a silent, persistent ache. Just 2 months after Eleanor's death, that same yearning heart began to fail her when Joy was diagnosed with a chronic heart condition. She endured it with quiet fortitude for several years, but in 2003, she too slipped away. Silently, peacefully, in her sleep. And so only Grace and Sarah remained. Sarah, my Emily, had built a new life. It's a vibrant tapestry woven with the threads of 2 cherished children, a loving husband, and a comfortable home. She was Emily Rodriguez, now no longer the terrified ex-nun. For a few years, I continued to live alone, working at the factory. However, in 2005, when the factory branch was sold, I recognized it was time for another profound change. I relocated to a small, picturesque town nestled in the foothills of North Carolina, purchased a modest house, and opened a quiet sewing shop, a place where I could work with my hands and find a gentle rhythm to my days. Emily and her family visited several times a year, our bond unbreakable. As I aged, the solemn promise I had made to Eleanor weighed heavier and heavier on my conscience. An insistent, unyielding burden. The truth about Havenwood, the insidious evil that had lurked behind sacred walls, could not, must not, die with me. But how could I fulfill that promise without jeopardizing Emily's hard-won peace, her carefully constructed family life? How could I reveal such a monstrous truth after so many years, with no more tangible proof than my own trembling words? The answer, like a fragile seed pushing through barren earth, began to emerge, gradually, painstakingly. I started collecting old news clippings following obscure clues, piecing together fragments of information, and, most importantly, gathering the immense courage that had lain dormant within me for decades. In 2007, a profound sense of readiness, of an unyielding resolve settled upon me. I knew with absolute certainty that I was finally prepared to take the momentous step that would shatter my silence. That would give voice to the story that had been buried for far too long. Fear, my friends, manifested in countless insidious ways during those decades. Some days it was a crushing tightness in my chest that stole my breath. Other times it was a persistent, icy chill in the pit of my stomach, a constant dread. And then there were the moments when it was simply a fleeting shadow at the very edge of my vision, something almost imperceptible, yet never fully absent. For 28 long, agonizing years of anonymity, I came to know every single face of fear, every chilling nuance of its pervasive grip. Even in the briefest moments of tranquility, it was a silent, unwelcome companion. A chilling whisper reminding me that our fragile peace could, at any moment, collapse into utter ruin. Every priest I encountered, however briefly, sent my heart racing. Asterisk, does he know Father Michael? Asterisk, every casual mention of Havenwood, however innocent, froze me in a paralyzing grip. Asterisk, have they found us? Have you ever felt that fear that paralyzes the soul? That makes your heart beat so hard it feels like it's going to break your ribs. I felt it constantly in that convent. After Mother Annis's illness, Father Michael proved to be cunning, knowing how to behave so as not to arouse suspicion in front of several people. He appeared proper, but when he managed to isolate one of us, his inner demon manifested. I began to realize that he created situations on purpose, sending separate messages to each sister. Sister Sarah, I need to discuss an important matter with you in the sacristy. Sister Grace, come to the library after prayers. Poor Sarah was the one who suffered the most. Very young, having just taken her final vows, she was too shy to defend herself. I witnessed on several occasions how he pressed her against the wall, how he spoke too close to her face, how his hands accidentally touched parts of the body that no man should touch. One night, I found Sarah huddled in the pantry, trembling and adjusting her habit. He says he's my spiritual guide, she whispered, adding that she must obey him and that if she told anyone, she would go to hell. My blood boiled, and for the first time, I felt true hatred. I hugged Sarah and promised to protect her. But how? Who would believe the word of two nuns against a respected priest? I tried to talk to Sister Eleanor. We have to do something, I said. Eleanor sighed and asked what I suggested, saying that no one would believe us, as a priest's word was worth more than ours. But what about Mother Agnes? She has to know. The mother is very ill, and even if we had the chance, she would side with a priest against the church. The situation deteriorated further when Sister Joy also became a target of his attacks. Before always so cheerful, she began to become quiet, lose her appetite, and her eyes were now constantly red from crying so much. One afternoon, she finally broke down in sobs, telling me that Father Michael had called her for special spiritual guidance and began to interrogate her about her chastity. The moment I tried to leave, she recounted. He grabbed my arm with such force that he left a bruise. Something inside me broke. Seeing Joy, once so strong, reduced to that state, it was as if he were annihilating her very essence. I started to pay more attention and make plans to protect the sisters. I tried to make sure none of them were ever left alone with him, inventing tasks that had to be done in a group. However, he noticed my actions and began to isolate me, spreading information among the older sisters that I was showing problems with obedience. Sister Martha began to watch me with suspicion. Father Michael asked me, Grace, is it true that you have shown rebellion? My desire was to scream the truth, but I was aware it would be useless. She would never believe me over him. It was then that I understood that words would be insufficient and that I needed proof. I began to observe and meticulously record every detail, dates, times, his words, and his actions. One night he crossed all boundaries. Sarah came to my room, trembling so much she could barely stand. Her face had finger marks and her habit was torn at the shoulder. He tried, she whispered in the confessional. He said it was a penance that I had to give myself to him to be purified of my sins. The anger I felt was unlike any other emotion I had ever experienced. This ends today, I declared. The next morning, under the pretext of needing to purchase special supplies for the infirmary, a task sometimes assigned to me, I was granted permission to go into town. Instead of heading to the market, I went straight to the office of the regional bishop. I waited for 3 hours until they received me. When I finally went in, I felt my courage waver, but thinking of Sarah and Joy, I found strength. I recounted everything, presented my notes, described the incidents, and explained how Father Michael used his authority to intimidate us. The bishop listened attentively in silence, and when I finished, he sighed. Sister Grace, these are extremely serious accusations. Father Michael is an exemplary priest. Are you sure? My heart sank. Despite all the evidence, doubts still lingered. I am absolutely sure, I replied firmly. I fear for the well-being of my sisters as long as he continues to have access to the convent. I will investigate the case, but I urge you to maintain absolute discretion. A scandal of this magnitude could seriously damage the image of the church. I left with a mixture of hope and apprehension. I had done everything in my power within the system. 2 nights later, Father Michael showed up at the convent outside of his usual hours, his face contorted with fury. He remained locked in a room with Sister Eleanor for almost an hour. When he came out, Eleanor looked devastated while the priest wore a triumphant smile. As he passed me, he whispered, "God punishes those who lie about his servants. The bishop told me everything." I was in shock. The bishop had revealed everything, including who had filed the complaint. Eleanor came to my room. "What have you done, Grace?" "You went to the bishop behind our backs." I tried to justify myself, but she shook her head, showing her disappointment. "Father Michael claims you have psychological problems, that you're making up stories. The bishop believed him and now demands that you be transferred or expelled." Reality hit me full force. Not only had they believed him instead of me, but now I was being punished for trying to protect my sisters. "It's not fair," I murmured. "He's hurting you." Eleanor sat on my bed, dejected. "Life isn't always fair, Grace, especially for women like us." The next morning, I was called to the office. Father Michael was already there. With delight, he read the bishop's order aloud, savoring every word of my immediate transfer to a remote convent in rural Montana for insubordination and defamation against a man of God. In that instant, I understood that justice was unattainable for us within that structure. It was then that I made a decision that would transform my existence forever. I would not go to Montana. I would find an alternative, even if it meant disappearing. "We are going to leave," I declared to my united companions, "to flee." The mere mention of that word echoed ceaselessly in my mind, day and night. I never imagined that one day I would be planning an escape from a convent, the place I had chosen as my home. Yet there we were, 5 frightened nuns whispering in the cellar, surrounded by crates of potatoes and canned goods. Sister Eleanor, always thoughtful, expressed her hesitation. "If we run, we'll look guilty. They'll say we have something to hide." "And we do," replied Joy bitterly. "We have to hide our shame, our humiliation, the fact that the church has abandoned us." Sister Sarah just sobbed quietly, hugging her knees. Sister Martha, the eldest, remained silent for a long time. 60 years, she said finally. "For 60 years, I have served God within these walls. I thought I would find peace in death here. However, now I realize that sometimes God demands sacrifices we do not understand. If it is necessary to leave to protect my sisters, then His will be done." Her words solidified our decision. We would flee together. But how could 5 women with no financial resources, no contacts, and no direction accomplish such a feat? The convent wall was imposing, adorned with shards of glass at the top. The gate was heavy and noisy, and even if we managed to get through it, where would we go? We needed outside help, someone we could trust.